Today we're discussing the latest NHL trade rumors involving the Montreal Canadiens, Philadelphia Flyers, New Jersey Devils, and New York Islanders. Plus, we have some more updates on the NHL coaching carousel. Plus, are the Nashville Predators for sale? It sounds like there could be a change in ownership there coming soon. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, a couple quick items. We got the signing in Columbus. The Jackets have signed a young player, former first-rounder Liam Foudy. Gets a 2-year contract extension. He just completed his entry-level contract. Unfortunately for Foudy, he thought by now he might establish himself as a more regular, consistent NHL player in their lineup. This year was not great for him from that perspective, at least. Spent a lot of time, not being on the Jackets roster, playing in the minors. So we'll see what the future brings. The 2-year deal is valued at $762,000 per season at the NHL level. Certainly didn't have a lot of negotiating power here, considering how the results have gone more recently, but he's got speed to burn, great skater. Obviously, if there's other aspects of his game they want him to work on, but it'd be nice to see Foudy become a more regular contributor to the Jackets this coming season. Of course, we had talked about before that John Tortorella was going to be the new head coach in Philadelphia. That was officially confirmed today and announced, and of course, he talked to the media as well. So Torts is officially the Flyers coach on a 4-year deal, rumored to be valued around $4 million per season. So obviously, we do expect the Flyers to be somewhat active, which we'll get into here a little bit in the rumor section of the video. Speaking of coaching, we also got some interesting news out of the Florida Panthers organization. Now, of course, if any of you are probably following along, we have numerous NHL coaching vacancies, but a few of them are because there's interim head coaches. This applies to like Andrew Brunette in Florida, Jay Woodcroft in Edmonton. And as of right now, it's not 100% clear if those guys are going to become, full-time permanent head coaches of those NHL franchises. Now, in Edmonton, they obviously had a pretty good run to the conference final. We do expect Jay Woodcroft to become the head coach. Everything we've heard so far indicates they're just sorting out the contract, and that's that for now. But in Florida, we know that they were the top team in the league, President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers, who got swept in round 2. And it doesn't sound like Bill Zito and management team and maybe the ownership as well are not completely thrilled with how things went down, because as of yet we do not have clarity if Andrew Brunette will be the head coach or not. Will he go back to being an assistant coach like he was before? Obviously, he took over this team under somewhat difficult circumstances this year when Joel Quenneville was basically abruptly removed from the position as the connections came out after the report from the Kyle Beach scenario in Chicago. Obviously, a lot of people lost jobs because of their involvement in that, and Quenneville, of course, was one of them. So Brunette takes over. The Panthers seem to not miss a beat there for quite a while, finished first in the league. He's a finalist for the Jack Adams Trophy, which I'd have to say that I don't know if you've ever been a finalist for the Jack Adams Award and go from that to being demoted right away. Like, I don't know if that's ever happened. I know we've seen coaches lose their job within a year or two of winning it, but that's a completely different story. But in the case of Florida here, like I said, they lost to Tampa, and they lost pretty badly. And I do wonder myself, like I was questioning why there didn't seem to be more adjustments. And I wonder, obviously, Bill Zito had some concerns as well. Well, we now have reports that the Florida Panthers are talking to a lot of other coaching candidates, including some pretty prominent names. I mean, we got word today between what Elliotte Friedman was saying on the latest 32 Thoughts podcast that came out yesterday, and then, of course, other news today between like Darren Dreger, Frank Saravalli. A lot of them are talking about this today, that they've interviewed guys like Peter DeBoer, Barry Trotz, Rick Tocchet, Travis Green, and there is some speculation that maybe even Paul Maurice might be in the mix. I know it was Saravalli that mentioned Maurice. I know Friedman did also mention that he didn't think Barry Trotz was involved with Florida, but there are some that think he might be. So obviously, still, regardless of if Barry Trotz is involved or not, there's still lots of other prominent, experienced head coaches there that the Panthers are talking to. And if they're talking to, 5 or 6 experienced coaches about possibly coming in, that doesn't really give you much faith that they really see Andrew Brunette as being the head coach. At this point, I'd almost be surprised if he's not removed. Now, could he go back to being an assistant? It is possible. I believe he's still under contract for that role. They've already announced some of the other assistant coaches are not going to be coming back, like McKenzie and Samuelson. So I don't know what's going on in Florida, but it looks as though they don't have a lot of confidence right now in Brunette. At least that's what would make you think based on what's going on. and it's not clear if Burnett's going to be involved, not involved, what capacity, or are they going to have a whole new head coach? Time will tell, but as of right now, we're not really clear, except now we know that they are talking to other potential candidates. So some changes are taking place in Los Angeles as well. They're going to need a new assistant coach because assistant coach Marco Sturm is moving down to their American Hockey League franchise, the Ontario Reign, to become the new head coach of that team. So obviously Sturm has been on the bench in LA for the last few years. So he'll now, basically it's like a promotion, I guess you can say, because he's going to a head coaching role. I know Marco Sturm definitely has long-term NHL head coaching aspirations from what we had heard before. So this isn't really a surprising move. So we'll see if the Kings add somebody onto their NHL staff now to do what he used to do for them. In the other news that was interesting today, we got reports from a variety of places. I think it was Sportico that started at first, but there's other reports from ESPN and others confirming some of these details. But it sounds like the Nashville Predators are actually for sale. And it sounds like the new owner, or at least the new majority owner, will be former Tennessee governor and billionaire businessman Bill Haslam. Now, of course, he is the brother of the owner of the Cleveland Browns. So his brother owns that team. And from what I've heard, I'm not a huge football fan, but from what I've heard and read about the Browns owner, not really looked upon as being the greatest. So I guess most people are saying they hope that he does a better job at being a sports owner than his brother has with the Browns. But I can't speak on personal knowledge of that. That's just what people are saying. Like I said, I'm not really a huge NFL guy, so I don't know in that regard. But I will say this, from what we do know, it's not going to be something that's a one-shot deal where he just buys the team. So essentially how this is going to work is that he's going to be buying shares on a gradual basis over approximately 3 years. Now, currently, the Nashville Predators have a consortium of owners. There's 17 different members of that ownership group that have different stakes in the team. It's obviously led by Herbert Fritsch, who owns the majority share. So he's like the lead owner. So his shares are all being sold to the new owner, Bill Haslam. Now, from what we've been told and heard from ESPN so far, it sounds like the other minority owners appear to not be selling off their stake, at least not as of now. That's what the plan is that he's going to be buying the shares from Fritsch gradually over 3 year span. So he will eventually become the new lead majority owner of that franchise. And we'll see. I guess one of the main attractiveness here, not only is it a good market, the team has done well, but they're very heavily interested in Bridgestone Arena. Bridgestone Arena is one of the busier arenas across the United States, generating some really good revenue. So obviously that's a big part of it, and the revenue sharing between the arena to the team is all intact there. So it makes it a very lucrative business deal. So we'll see where things go, but that's the reports right now. I know that's what ESPN has confirmed here in the last couple of hours, so we'll see if this gets confirmed. I know there was a quote, the article from Greg Wyszynski in the ESPN did talk to Bill Daly quickly, and he said that the sale was briefly discussed at the last Board of Governors meeting, but it wasn't overly detailed, and that, of course, they will have final say on any sale. That'll have to be approved by the league. I'm not quite sure exactly at what stage it'll be ready to take it to that step. So we'll see. But either way, some news there that we weren't anticipating today. On to the rumor section of the video. Like I said, we have 4 teams we're going to take a look at. A couple of these teams are new to Frank Saravalli's trade bait board at dailyfaceoff.com. He put out an updated trade bait list here for the offseason, and a couple of names that were, new, getting attention here that weren't on there before. One is New Jersey Devils goaltender Mackenzie Blackwood. He says here in the article that after 2 years of fairly consistent struggles, it might be time for a change of scenery. Now, of course, we know that the Devils definitely need to do something with their goaltending for sure. They do have Jonathan Bernier under contract, but he hasn't played. Not really clear if he's going to be able to play. And we do know that from other reports, it sounds like Tom Fitzgerald, the general manager, intends on making at least a couple of significant moves to try to get this team moving forward. I don't think they were overly thrilled about not seeing as much progress last year as they hoped. Sounds like they're bringing back head coach Lindy Ruff, as far as we know. But I would think it's fair to say after last year that he might have a short leash. If they don't start strong and they have some struggles out of the gate, I wouldn't be shocking to see a coaching change maybe next year. I know a lot of people were convinced that he wouldn't be back, but I know at the end of the year he get a major endorsement from young center Jack Hughes. And not to say that would make all the decisions here for Fitzgerald, but I would think that it would be important for him to take that into consideration, given how prominent of a player he is on the team. So with Blackwood, he could definitely possibly be involved in a trade. I had mentioned before, it was just an idea I had. I could see them maybe being one of the players in the John Gibson scenario. Obviously, we know Gibson is reportedly on the trade block by the Anaheim Ducks. There's been reports and there's been conflicting reports, you could say, but whether or not he wants a trade, some say he does. He himself come out and said that he's fine being in Anaheim and has not requested a trade. And I don't think that it's actually reached the point where he says he wants out. I think he's given the impression, and the team has the impression, that he would welcome it, but it's not something that has to happen. It really boils down to what GM Pat Verbeek seems to think is best for the team's future. And, at that, we don't know. But we've seen them ship out a lot of other veterans in the last little while here, especially at the trade deadline. And it wouldn't be shocking if Gibson was one of the next to go. Don't know that his contract and age and everything kind of lines up with the future direction of this team. And if they do want to make a move, New Jersey would be a great spot for him to go to, and I wouldn't be shocked if he did that. Mackenzie Blackwood might be going back the other way. Obviously, he's a little bit younger than Gibson, a little less expensive, and might make more sense for Anaheim. So if they did do a swap, I could see both goalies maybe being involved. But another rumored suggestion here for the New Jersey Devils that I've heard is that they could be going after goaltender Ville Husso if he reaches free agency. Of course, the St. Louis Blues netminder is a pending UFA. If he doesn't get signed by the Blues before the free agent period kicks in, that the Devils would be one of the teams that would be likely very interested there, and they might try to sign him. Probably looking at I'm going to guess 3 or 4 year deal, around $4 million is probably what it's going to take to get Husso signed, and maybe run with a 1A, 1B combination of Blackwood and Husso, and see if maybe having a stronger goaltender for Blackwood to compete with might be enough to get him going, and hopefully have two goalies who can, play a good amount of games, because the tandem, style of goaltending seems to be the way most teams are heading now. It might be best for the team in that regard, but only time will tell what happens here. But it wouldn't be shocking to see Blackwood find himself on the move if the right deal comes along, of course. Now, Sarah Valley also mentions that Islanders winger Anthony Beauvillier is generating a lot of interest from around the league. We know that the Islanders are bound to or at least try really hard to make a couple of significant moves, ideally adding a top 4 left shot defenseman and a scoring winger, ideally somebody who can be a more potent offensive player with Matthew Barzal. Beauvillier has had his moments where he's certainly played in the top 6 and has produced, but he's also been inconsistent at times as well. Scored a few playoff goals. I'm sure that he's a player that I think it's fair to say is fairly popular with the fans, and I don't know if a lot of fans would really want to see him go, but he's one of the younger players on a team that would have a good enough value to hopefully bring back something more significant in return if they really do decide they want to shake things up. So, of course, again, no guarantee that Beauvillier is moved, but considering what we've heard about the Islanders' potential plans, and we know that Lou Lamoriello keeps things pretty solid on lockdown, and a lot of the NHL insiders with a lot of intel and sources have a hard time getting information out of Long Island. This is interesting to hear on Beauvillier. Of course, like I said, though, a lot of these guys don't necessarily just talk to teams to find out what that team is doing. They'll talk to other teams and have sources, and they'll know what's going on because they'll know what they're up to as well, right? So certainly, word gets around and travels quick. So we'll see what happens. But Beauvillier could be one of the trade chips Lou uses to accomplish some of their offseason goals this offseason. Now, of course, I want to talk about Philadelphia and Montreal here first as well. Montreal, of course, is getting and obviously a lot of attention right now. We saw the trade yesterday between Montreal and Vegas where they picked up Dadonov from Vegas in exchange for the contract of Shea Weber. So obviously that deal helps Vegas out. It gets a real player's contract who's going to play off the books and adds another contract in its place that they can now stash in LTIR and spend above the cap. So certainly it's good for them because they obviously have a major cap issue, and they're not going to be worried about being in LTIR, whereas the Habs are trying to get out of LTIR, create some cap flexibility, and get themselves in a much better spot, and sending out some veterans, including that contract, could be the way to go. And of course, they also might need to have LTIR usage for Carey Price, which is not clear yet. Kent Hughes did have a press conference after that trade yesterday and said some interesting things that I did want to discuss here today. One of them, the fact that they need to go into the offseason here prepared for Carey Price to play, but they really don't know what's going on with him. And he even said that it might be closer to training camp or even into camp before they have a better indication of what Carey Price's status is going to be. I know they had mentioned before that they were really hoping to know by the time the draft and free agency rolled around, especially free agency, given there's a short gap in between. But, Hughes is now saying that they may not really have an idea. So that just goes to show you the uncertainty around Carey Price. But ultimately, he said, he's going to do everything he can to play. And I do believe that. But of course, it's, I'm sure, tough to plan when you don't know what you're going to have on your roster. So they could have a player like Price end up on long-term injury reserve. If they had Weber as well, that's just way too much money tied up in that, and it's just really difficult to navigate your cap space that way. But there's also some other veterans that were brought up in conversation. Like one of the names that were mentioned in his press conference yesterday, he was asked about Jeff Petrie. He did indicate that, of course, a deal is not imminent right now. He didn't really want to make it sound like anything was close, and it doesn't sound like it is. But certainly there is discussions around Petrie. It sounds like the desire to be traded on his part or for the team's part, both, is probably still very much there. So if they can find a deal that works, he's likely is going to be moved. He also brought up by name, of course, he was also brought up the fact about Josh Anderson getting a ton of interest. Now, of course, Hughes said that his phone has been extremely busy as of late. Lots of trade talk taking place. He did acknowledge that Anderson was getting a lot of attention, but he also made a comment to say that clearly goes to show you how much we like and value this player if we haven't moved him yet, given what the talk has been. So it sounds like there's tons of teams that are trying to see if they can find a way to pry Anderson out of Montreal. We do know there's some other guys that are probably more desirable on Montreal's part of it to trade. Probably a guy like Mike Hoffman, maybe a Jonathan Drouin, maybe a Paul Byron, a Yoel Armia. I think any of those guys would probably be higher on Hughes' list to move on from than Anderson if he can help it. But of course, it's difficult to trade players with less value at the same time. So we'll see. But there's tons of interest in Anderson, and I wonder if a team comes along to make it interesting enough that he has to consider it. So time will tell in that regard. We'll have to wait and see. I know Jeff Merrick on his program on the radio today with Sportsnet, the Jeff Merrick Show, talking to Elliot Friedman, said he wondered if a team like Columbus, who of course used to have Anderson and traded him to Montreal, might be one of those teams gauging interest to see if they can find a way to get him back. He said when you look at the roster composition of the Jackets and what they have coming up for some younger players as well, that a guy like Anderson would be, a nice, interesting kind of player for them to have back on that roster to help them move forward. And obviously, the trade Anderson for Domi didn't really work out on the Columbus side of it. So if Anderson was available, you have to wonder if they might try to get him back. So we'll see. No guarantee that they do that. No guarantee he gets moved at all. But if Montreal is getting that much interest, it just goes to show you that the value is getting pushed up the more it's talked about, in a sense, because that means they know teams inquiring know how much competition there is to maybe pry him away. And if they don't get the right offer, it's not going to happen. But look for guys like Anderson and Petrie. Seem to be getting the most trade talk around them right now. But the other guys I mentioned certainly could find himself on a move as well. You could probably throw Christian Dvorak into that conversation as well. Now, in regards to the Flyers, obviously the unveiling of John Tortorella, or confirming, I should say, of the him being the next head coach in franchise history, certainly got a lot of people talking today. I know Darren Dreger was on the Instigators podcast talking about the scenarios that we could see unfold in Philadelphia, and he was quite clear with the fact that he expects the Flyers to be extremely busy. He said you don't bring in a guy like John Tortorella to go through a rebuild. And from what he's heard and from what everybody seems to be getting for information out of Philly, it sounds like Chuck Fletcher is definitely going to be trying to make some pretty aggressive moves and trying to hit a couple of home runs on some trades to really get this team turned around. I mean, there was a lot of talk before about James Van Riemsdyk being a contract that they try to move on. I know that's obviously another name that's been mentioned on the Frank Seravalli trade bait board as well. So multiple sources talking about that. Apparently at one point, there was a JVR trade that was close in the past but never took place around the deadline. Obviously, I would think they'd have to retain some money, but still a player that can definitely be moved with 1 year left, but he's making $7 million, so there's no way he's going to another team with that cap hit without something being retained. Guys like Travis Konechny, you never know. I know the team has been a little bit frustrated with his inconsistencies, and I do wonder about Ivan Provorov too. I mean, I know we talked before about the fact that they might not want to move Provorov because he hasn't really had a chance to play much with Ryan Ellis because of his injuries, but like I said, I don't know. Like John Tortorella has a reputation for really pushing GMs to make trades and deals to bring in players that he likes. So we'll see what he thinks the team needs. And certainly, like I said, we got confirmation from NHL insiders saying expect Chuck Fletcher to be extremely aggressive and busy, one of their busier off seasons, just like they did a few years ago when they were trying to retool. And here we go again, because the team doesn't seem to think it needs a rebuild, even though many other people do agree that it could greatly benefit from it. But they do have some interesting young players to kind of mix in with some of the veteran guys, but we'll see what happens. Obviously, when it comes to Johnny Gaudreau, I think it's fair to say I wouldn't be shocked to see them get involved with the sweepstakes if he hits free agency. I think the same goes for the New Jersey Devils. At this point, we don't know what's going to happen, but I know Dreger himself on the same podcast said that at this point he would be shocked if Johnny Gaudreau does not make it to the market in free agency to at least see what else is out there. He didn't rule out the fact that he, was definitely leaving Calgary or anything like that, but he's gone this far that he'd be shocked if he didn't at least make it to free agency to see what's there. And basically from checking in, I know guys like Dreger and Cervelli mentioned on Gaudreau that right now it sounds like there's really no updates. So there might be some conversations happening, but it's not really leading to any hard negotiations. At least it doesn't sound like it, where they're getting anywhere near a deal. So I would think that would probably be accurate with the fact that he very, very is likely to test free agency and see what's out there. And if he thinks Calgary is the best place for him, he will sign. But if he doesn't, he may go elsewhere. And that's definitely a different scenario that we're not really sure how it's going to unfold here as of yet. But that is all your news and rumors for today. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.